All right. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. This is Dr. Patrick Lockwood coming back to you live to talk about another wellness topic. I hope you all have had a good 2 weeks since I've last spoken with you, or spoken at you, I guess. A lot has been going on in this world, so the book is on its way. I'm really excited to see what happens when the fear problem comes out and see how everyone responds to it. Um, I think it's going to be a useful book for everyone, so I'll let you know ASAP whenever there is an official print and sell date, release date, but just be on the lookout for that. Another thing is I'm already in talks about my second book with them, so be on the lookout for something a little new, a little different coming your way. Less about emotionality, more about the mind. And it's a big topic, and a lot of very, very brilliant people have already tackled this idea of mind and healthy mind. But I have a couple of ideas I'd like to toss your way, and my publisher seems to like it too. So book number 2 is actually in the works. So thank you again to Mascot Books for all of your support, and I'll keep you all updated as things come up. So today, I thought it would be helpful if we spoke about one of the more kind of vague sounding psychological concepts called curiosity. And there are a lot of very, very easy examples, I think, in popular media, shows, etc., and just in our cultural narrative about either the benefits or the harms of curiosity. So one of them that everyone probably has said at some point in their life, or at least heard, is the phrase, curiosity killed the cat. And I think a second cultural reference that I think is important for us to keep in the back of our minds as I'm talking is kind of the story of Curious George, the little monkey who was adopted, I guess, by some guy in the big city, in the suburb of the big city. I want you to keep those two phrases, curiosity killed the cat and Curious George, I want you to keep those two concepts in your mind as I'm going through the different kind of research topics and even defining it, because I think both of those ideas of curiosity killed the cat and Curious George speak to some fundamental truth, evolutionarily speaking, about why curiosity is important to understand and why curiosity is important to know how to kind of wrangle and control, as it were, or allow it to function better. So just a brief overview of why curiosity is important outside of those cultural reasons is, generally speaking, the research shows that curiosity is an important part of our holistic sense of wellness, like I'm okay, I'm functioning well as an individual. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that curiosity is a fundamental component of creativity. So we can't just randomly come up with something out of nowhere. Like aha moments are almost always derived out of some kind of previous curiosity about a concept or a thought or an idea or a feeling or a piece of art or something. So curiosity is fundamental for creativity. Curiosity is a fundamental part of scientific thought and scientific inquiry. If we weren't curious about how things worked, we would have no clue about atoms, quark, gluons, protons, all of that stuff. The CERN super collider would never have existed. Most of my profession in psychology and in business, both of those professions that I'm a part of, neither of which would really exist if we weren't curious how to do things better, if we didn't want to know how the mind worked, if we didn't want to know how people worked. So it's a very, very important topic, curiosity is. And I just want to leave you with those things. A couple of other important points as to why curiosity is a very, very important thing for us to pay attention to. Right now, we're in an age where we can just Google search everything and kind of know things right away, which is kind of making us closed-minded as a species, because when we just randomly search and find one immediate fact that makes us either confirm and feel good about our previous assumption or deny it, which makes us feel bad about it, we kind of become very closed-minded. We give up on actually knowing more. So, right, the easy example nowadays is politics. So you can't stand Donald Trump or you can't stand Hillary Clinton, one of those two big political figures in the United States. You might do a quick Google search and find 10 negative articles about each of them. And that would readily close your mind or confirm, I guess you could say, whatever you think about those individuals. The problem is 10 articles is not nearly an appropriate enough snapshot in terms of how much there is to know about the person and in terms of what there really is that we need to know about the person. So that's the first thing. We are getting lazy. We need to be more curious because curiosity allows us to grow and function and make better rational decisions. And again, the final reason why curiosity is important is because given all of our tribalistic instincts nowadays with, I don't know, like politics and religion and greed and news media, we're lacking healthy curiosity about what the other side thinks. So if you're a Republican nowadays, you're probably not very curious as to what Democrats or liberals are really trying to accomplish. You have the sense that you already know because you've heard news articles or reports or whatever. Oh, and the same thing goes for liberals and anyone on the other side of the aisle. So if you're participating in this, your side is worse or bad compared to mine process, your curiosity is shot because your tribalistic instinct, which I wrote a lot about in my fear book that's coming out, is basically saying, well, I need to close my mind to protect myself so that I can be more aligned with the culture and the tribe that I'm a part of so that I don't look like an outsider, so that I can basically participate better in my own tribe. And that's a problem because we're not learning about each other. We need to be learning. We need to be learning everything all the time. So that's one thing. What else? So those are the reasons why curiosity is important. I hope that makes sense. So those are the reasons, and then the two metaphors I want you to keep in mind are Curious George and then Curiosity Killed the Cat. So how do we define curiosity specifically? So the easiest way is to just look at the Oxford Dictionary. So it says, eager to learn or know something. So really, curiosity is kind of synonymous with being eager or eager to know something. I don't know if I like that definition the best. So based upon the research, scientific, psychological, cognitive research, we basically have a very different definition of curiosity than the Oxford Dictionary. And one way to sum it up is that curiosity is defined in three concepts: a need for cognition or thinking. It's about how we engage intellectually with the world, secondarily. So how often, how intensely, etc. And then the third component is openness to ideas. So there's a how much do we want it? How thirsty are we for knowing things, which is the Oxford definition. Then how open are we to ideas? So amount of open-mindedness. And then what is our typical style? What typical content, topics, etc.? That's really what curiosity is it's a combination of those three things, or it's the manner in which we deal with these three concepts of thirst for cognition or need for it, openness for ideas, and then style of learning and understanding. So that's how the research would define curiosity, or how the scientific psychological world would. And then one of the first authors who talked about curiosity was this author named Berlin. And Berlin broke curiosity down into a perceptual curiosity, as in, what does this look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What is it? Versus epistemic curiosity, which is more like, how do we know? What do we know? What is it? What does it mean? Kind of thing. And then another way that Berlin broke down curiosity is specific, so wanting to know about a particular topic, versus diversive, which is a broad understanding of what is, kind of holistically speaking. So the concept of epistemic curiosity, Berlin's concept of epistemic curiosity, has been challenged a little bit in the research because basically, it's kind of a subcategory, they say, of perceptual curiosity, in the sense that you can't want to know what something is without wanting to know, like, what does it look like, what does it sound like, what does it smell like. It's kind of the same thing. So is it a car, or what does the car look like, what does the car sound like, what does the car smell like, kind of thing. It's kind of the same thing. It's not well differentiated in terms of what they call discriminant validity in the scientific sense. But that's neither here nor there for you guys. So those are the ways of defining curiosity. I would stick with the second thing that I said, not Berlin's definition and not the Oxford definition. I would say that if you want to simply define curiosity, it's just, what is our typical thirst for understanding? What is our typical openness to ideas, which is more of a mindset and an attitude? And then what is our typical style of learning or being engaged in something? Because all three of those components is going to dictate what your curiosity looks like. So, as I said earlier with the Berlin definitions, the research basically says there are a bunch of different theories of how and why we're curious. And for those of you who have listened to me in previous talks, or whatever you want to call these, I really tend towards the evolutionary psych perspective on things, because it seems to be the one that makes the most sense. And it seems to be the one that allows us to get the best results, as it were. So, you know, there's the exploratory curiosity theory, there's the information gap theory of curiosity. These are all theories to explain why we're curious. But for me, at the end of the day, evolutionary psychology kind of outlines it the best. So basically, the evolutionary psych perspective on curiosity is that all mammals, all creatures are designed to be curious, especially in terms of the literal sense of looking around all day long. Because if you just reflect on yourself for a moment, all day you're looking around, you're talking to people, you're looking at, you know, the traffic passing by, you're looking at other people in your office, or people in things in nature, animals, cars. You're constantly looking, you're constantly thinking about what's going on. Whether it's conscious or unconscious doesn't matter. So basically, we're designed to be on the lookout, as it were. So in order to be on the lookout, we have to have some reason to be on the lookout. And according to evolutionary psychology, the reason we have to be on the lookout is to be able to A, protect ourselves, but B, learn, so that we can grow, make more adaptive decisions, and maybe succeed better so that our genes survive, as it were. So in the cognitive sense, in the brain sense, we are curious, and we are designed around the concept of noticing that things are off or different. So half of how we participate in the world in terms of curiosity is a noticing that things are off or that things are different. So that's half of the motivation for being curious, is to assess for what's different, or to assess for what's off, or what needs to be figured out. Or we have kind of like Berlin, what Berlin said is a specific curiosity, in terms of like, we want to know more about a particular topic because it is useful to us. So like, the easy example for me is I am really, really, really obsessed with this concept of how neuroscience informs the way we manage feelings, in the sense of, if we know what brain areas do generally what, to what degree, can we predict better how to deal with our feelings and how to treat people? Because in my profession, a lot of the old theories are very useful, but what we're learning is that people are very, very messy and complex. So if I can learn more about the mess and the complexity from the most well-validated scientific, most crystal clear view of things, which is neuroscience in my opinion, then maybe we can have a better chance of helping people, and helping people live better, just better, not be without sadness or anxiety or PTSD or whatever, but just better, right? So for me, I have a specific curiosity about that other people would not. That has nothing to do with how we're evolutionarily designed, in the sense of we need to be on the lookout for what neuroscience says. No, we need to be on the lookout for what the spider is doing, or what the snake is doing, or whatever. We need to know what's off. Because normally if the ground is just brown and dirt, but all of a sudden here's this very, different looking slithering thing coming our way, we need to be aware of that. There's something different. We need to be curious about that and inspect it. So the neuroscience research, speaking of the devil, says the reason we have this capacity to look at the world around us constantly and see what's off or what's different, or figure out what we need to figure out, as it were. That's why we have brain areas, higher brain areas that other animals don't have, like our orbital frontal cortex, or we have more density in these brain areas. Our orbital frontal cortex, our anterior cingulate, and down to our insula. These three areas play whenever we're curiosity. So these three areas light up when we're curious. And these three areas are basically designed to figure out what's rewarding, that's our orbital frontal cortex, what's connecting, what is worth pursuing or not, which is our anterior cingulate. Stop, go is the anterior cingulate, basically. Approach, don't approach. And then our insula. Are we disgusted? Is it good for us? Is it bad for us? All these things light up right before we start to seek out something. And that's why they're all heavily dopamine kind of run systems in the brain. It's our seeking system, as Panksepp would say. And then as soon as these areas light up and we're engaged in learning something or figuring something out, our hippocampus goes off so we can remember things, so we can encode and learn, right? And all these areas play interdynamically to help us be curious and learn about things. There's other areas like the caudate nucleus and inferior frontal gyrus that are associated with kind of how much we are aware of our desire to be curious, but they're not as important. They're just part of how we anticipate reward or learning or wanting, so to speak. So that's a quick neuroscience part of curiosity for you, if you're interested. But this is these brain areas that I just mentioned. These are implicated in all kinds of learning. We don't just do regular schoolwork, as it were, and completely different parts of the brain light up. No, everything that we do in life is a bunch of overlapping modules, as Robert Wright would say. And the modules I just mentioned, for, if you think of the orbital frontal and the anterior cingulate and the insula and the hippocampus as a module for curiosity, a curiosity module, it's the same module that's activated when we're looking at a textbook versus when we're looking at a really sexy looking car versus when we're looking at a squirrel, or we're looking at some other thing that seems different or worth exploring. Same module. And this is why I like people like Jaak Panksepp, because they talk about these detailed brain areas to talk about, in evolutionary terms, why it's important that we be curious, why we allow our seeking system, as he would say it, to be active in a way that's naturally satisfying. So things like computers, things like, social media and whatnot are not naturally satisfying. These are media concepts that actually hijack our natural curiosity parts of the brain, our natural curiosity module, because they represent some aspects of it and they are immediately reinforcing, but they're not actually good for us. Again, the evolutionary psych perspective on curiosity is we need it so that we can learn, grow, and advance as both individuals and tribes. This allows us to get our genes passed down, which means we're more fit. So here's what the research generally says about being a curious individual. So think of curiosity on a spectrum, as I always say, and on the one end of the spectrum, you're highly curious. You're a very, very, very curious individual. On the other end of the spectrum, you're much less curious. You're more satisfied with your routine and knowing what you know and staying in your kind of little box of the world. So the research talks about the pros and cons of being on either side of the spectrum, okay? So for instance, people who are higher in curiosity and high in motivation can actually overcome IQ deficits. So let's say average IQ is 100, but you're a very curious individual and you have high motivation. Maybe you need to do something for work or whatever. So because you're very curious and you're very motivated, you might actually do much better at that work task. You might learn more, you might engage more, and do better at that work task than someone who just has an IQ of 130, so to speak. So curiosity plus effort can overcompensate or overcome, as it were, your IQ limitations, which is a neat research finding. Another interesting thing is high curiosity is negatively correlated with problematic substance use. So people who are naturally curious are allowing their seeking system to go off in a way that leaves them satisfied, as opposed to needing to pacify themselves with substances. I could say a lot more about that because addiction is the industry in which I work, but I'll just leave it at that for now. And if you want to chat more about that, love to. Curiosity also seems to be important for skepticism. So, for instance, there are some research studies that show curiosity about science-related concepts, is highly correlated with a tendency to check one's political biases. Curiosity is also, or high amounts of curiosity is also correlated at around 0.34, which is fair, it's not great, with better job performance. And as I said with the personality talk a few months ago actually, curiosity is part of the openness factor. Openness to experience plus conscientiousness makes you really good at work, most jobs. Curiosity, or being more curious, this is a weird one. I don't have a lot of research on this particular correlation, but one study I found showed that people who are more curious are more likely to eat more fruits and vegetables. So you're kind of more likely to eat healthier foods if you're more curious. I don't know what that's about. It's a random correlation. Correlation does not equal causation, but it's interesting. Another important one for all of you out there, people who are higher in curiosity, like as a trait or as a disposition, are more likely to have nuanced understanding of their emotions. So they're having fine-grained experience with their emotionality. It's less broad, which is good because then you can act more specifically in the world. Emotions are kind of dictates for how to act or react. And following up on that, there's a fair number of research studies that show curiosity is highly correlated with affect regulation or using healthier skills like mindfulness. In fact, the more curious you are, the easier it is to be mindful. And this is why Dan Siegel and other people in that world of interpersonal neurobiology focus so much on the concept of rigidity versus flexibility. Because the reality is, we need to be more flexible in how we think as individuals. We're learning so much, and the more rigid we are, the more emotionally stuck we become. But the more flexible we become, especially with regard to our feelings, the more likely it is that we're able to manage those feelings better, deal with them in the sense of processing them better, and then do something useful with them better, which is great. Fun random fact for those of my friends out there who are in the LGBT world, it seems like LGBT males who are more curious tend to actually be more legitimate bisexuals, which is important. If you consider yourself somewhere on the queer spectrum and you find yourself to be a legitimately curious individual and you consider yourself bisexual, it's probably true. Otherwise, you might just be faking it. And I'd love to talk more about that. Lurking behavior, which is an online term that I understand in almost no way, shape, and form. But apparently there's a correlation between lurking behavior and curiosity and knowing facts. So this makes sense to me in the realm of, like, you're sitting online, you're looking through things, you want to know more. And that means you're probably higher on this concept called epistemic curiosity from Berlin. So again, correlation does not equal causation. They are not the same thing. But it's interesting to know that, generally speaking, being higher on curiosity is basically better correlated with better health outcomes across a variety of intellectual, physical, emotional domains. It's just interesting. It's worth knowing. One of the theories as to why curiosity is so important and adaptive overall is that curiosity kind of enhances our ability, whatever our natural ability is, to do something called creative self-efficacy. Or it's a sense that I can navigate in the world through new experiences with ease, if you want to call it that. Whether it's learning something, being an artist, being creative, managing conflict with a person, these things are very, very important. How we manage these things are very, very important. And the academic concept for that is creative self-efficacy. I can be creative. I can navigate through these experiences that are new and challenging adaptively. And that's why curiosity is so important, they say, because if we feel like this new experience is insurmountable, then we're going to give up. However, if we're curious, if we have the sense of, I can handle it, or I can overcome it, or I can explore my way through it, then we're more likely to challenge. We're more likely to do. We're more likely to try. And that's good. And again, just want to remind everyone, curiosity is a big component of this big 5 personality factor of openness to experience, which again is somewhat correlated to IQ in humans. So from this, I want to circle back to the concept of Curious George and the concept of curiosity killed the cat. So the running narrative in Curious George, from what I can barely remember, I didn't really watch it or read it or something as a kid, because I think there was a show too, is that the dad would always get really upset with the monkey because he was always learning, messing around, getting into trouble, but because he was curious. So the whole narrative is kind of in the, Shel Silverstein way. We need to actually be more loving and allowing and okay with curiosity, especially in our kids. I think the monkey is a nice little metaphor for kids, but all human beings. We need to be curious. We need to foster curiosity. And the reason we've kind of gotten away from that is because of, not only does it make a mess sometimes, but sometimes it results in disastrous consequences. And that's where the phrase curiosity killed the cat comes from in my mind. So on the one end, we have Curious George, which in my mind is a more positive example of curiosity, even though the dad's always frustrated. But on the other hand, we have curiosity killed the cat, because again, if you are curious enough and you're so lost in your curiosity that you're not paying attention to other things, you might get killed. You might get eaten by a predator. You might get hurt or taken advantage of, right? You might put yourself in a dangerous circumstance that you're unaware of. So all of these mental health wellness skills are not one-dimensional in the sense that, you just have to be more curious and you'll be healthy. That's bullshit. Nothing works that way. But what's important to take from all this research stuff I talked about is curiosity is very important. It allows us to not only learn and grow, but allows us to act in more adaptive ways. So there's some kind of spectrum of being more curious versus being more closed-minded. And generally speaking, we need more curiosity, it seems like nowadays, especially with the stupid political arguing that is going on and the lack of scientific interest by a lot of people in this culture, which is pathetic and sad. It is hurting us. It's not like a moral thing, it's just hurting us. So the more curious we are about why things are the way they actually are, the better we're going to do as a species. It's my firm belief. But the other caveat to that is if we're too curious, we might learn truths that don't feel good. The easy example of that is, correlations about race in the scientific literature, or correlations about sexuality in the scientific literature. The easy example is, gay males tend to have higher rates of STDs compared to the general population. Gay males tend to have higher rates of unsafe sex compared to the general population, it seems like, according to the CDC statistics, which means greater chance of HIV infection compared to the general population. That's an unfortunate statistic. That's an unfortunate fact that some people don't want to hear, and it will make them very defensive. But we have to acknowledge that. And that's where the whole curiosity killed the cat thing comes in, because people will be very reactive and defensive if you talk about the facts in a more straightforward way. I have no problem with anything about gay culture in the sense of be who you are, love who you want to love, and be the healthiest you that you can be. But all that unsafe sex stuff, all that partying, all the drug use, all of the negative stereotypes that they have developed out of shame, and all the shame-based behaviors that go on in the gay culture, which are legitimately due to some social circumstances, some other things as well, oppression or whatever. It's all true. Uh, not helping, not healthy. So we have to own that. And if you want to kill me for saying that, so to speak, okay, that's on you. But the reality is those are facts that exist. Same thing with race. There's a big hullabaloo about Sam Harris and Murray and other people and Jordan Peterson who talk about race and IQ. It's just a thing that exists in the nature. Stefan Molyneux talks about this too. It's a thing that exists. We don't like seeing that there's a difference. It exists. Does that make people who research it racist? Probably not. Does it sound racist? Sure. But they're not. It's just a fact that exists. Now, what does knowing it do for us? I don't know. It's so hard to say. But you can't kill the messenger, and you can't kill the person who's curious. The only time you need to hurt them or admonish them is when they're trying to do harmful, negative things with their knowledge. But just acquiring knowledge is not a bad thing. So I hope all this makes sense. I feel like I've talked for too long at this point. I appreciate you all watching and coming in. I've seen a few of you jump on and jump off here. And I look forward to talking with you more in 2 weeks about another science and wellness topic. But again, I want to leave you with the whole spectrum of Curiosity Killed the Cat to Curious George. In my mind, we need to move closer to Curious George and get more messy and get more creative and get more curious about things. Whereas Curiosity Killed the Cat comes up to this other side of the spectrum of being careful about what we do with what we learn and how we approach being curious. As in, are we being systematic or are we being kind of bohemian and like, you know, painting with a shotgun, as it were. So I'll talk to you all soon. Thank you for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thanks.